Good afternoon. As Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, we're delighted to partner with the JCPS Division of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty to host the Louisville Downtown Civil Rights Trail Professional Development Workshop. I'd like to thank Dr. Polio, JCPS board members, and Dr. John Marshall and his team for their enthusiastic support of this educational collaboration. The Civil Rights Movement is one of the defining events in American history, during which American citizens fought to make ideals of justice and equality a reality. Much of our memory of the Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and the 1960s is embodied in dramatic photographs, newsreels, and recorded speeches, which America encountered in daily newspapers and the nightly news. As the movement rolled across the nation, Americans were absorbed by images of hopeful, disciplined, and dedicated young people, shaping their destinies, who were met with hostility, federal ambivalence and indifference, as well as mob and police violence. Undeterred, they fought back with direct action protests and keen political organizing, such as voter registration drives. In Louisville, Kentucky, the campaign for an ordinance against discrimination in public accommodations centered on the shopping and dining corridor along 4th Street in the heart of our downtown business district. The demonstrations and set-ins were led by local students from junior and senior high schools, a small number of college students, surprisingly few adult African Americans, and a few sympathetic whites who occasionally joined the protests. The Louisville Downtown Civil Rights Markers Project memorializes not only the events, but the sites of the sit-in demonstrations through placement of 11 markers along 4th Street. The companion educational resource materials and professional development sessions provide educators with tools to enhance the quality of instruction about the civil rights movement and provide a framework designed to allow instructional strategies from multiple perspectives. We believe this partnership is a first step to ensure that students learn about the history, the heritage, and cultural contributions of African Americans and all of our citizens to our community's rich civil rights history. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy your session.
Hello, welcome to the Jefferson County Public Schools Professional Development in partnership with U of L College of Arts and Science. The civil rights landmarks and markers throughout Louisville is something that's very important to us as a people and something very important to us as a city. Under the leadership of Dr. Monica Lakwani, who works in diversity, equity, and poverty, and Celeste Lanier in the University of Louisville, we've created and designed a professional development that is bound to be something you enjoy, something that you learn from, and something you can take back into your classroom. Again, we understand with the advent of the racial equity policy, we understand with the continuous improvement that we need in our teaching and our pedagogy, that this is something right here locally that you can be a part of. This is something right here locally that you can bring into your classroom and teach students that may not know a lot about the civil rights that took place here in Louisville. So again, welcome. Thank you for being a part of this, and take advantage of this awesome PD led by University of Louisville and Jefferson County Public Schools. Thank you.
Turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I just keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom line. Ain't gonna let nobody, can't let them turn me around, Lord, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
Downtown Louisville, specifically 4th Street, was the center of the business and entertainment district in the 1960s. It was on 4th Street that you walked shoulder to shoulder with pedestrians. The city was alive on 4th Street. It was the place to be and to be seen. As great as it sounds, not everyone could enjoy all that 4th Street had to offer. In some ways, 4th Street showcased segregation at its worst. During the early 60s, blacks went to Walnut Street, now Muhammad Ali Boulevard, for entertainment and just about everything else. There were plenty of black-owned places to eat and nightclubs on Old Walnut Street. However, as times changed, a quiet storm was emerging in black communities and cities throughout the South. There was a desire for equality and access into whites-only establishments. Just imagine you're one of the student protesters. Let's begin this tour through Louisville's civil rights history. In Louisville, the sit-in campaign for an ordinance against discrimination and accommodations ignited the civil rights movement. The focus centered on the entertainment corridor, 4th Street, the heart of downtown. Unlike other cities that witnessed demonstrations by college students, the shock troops in the Louisville marches and sit-ins were students from local junior and senior high schools. The number of young people arrested sometimes was so large that they were held in the police gymnasium before being charged, usually with delinquency and breach of the peace, and then released. During the 60s, the Brown Theater, currently the W.L. Lyons Brown Theater, hosted newly released films. The theater is located on Broadway, between 3rd and 4th Streets across from the Hayburn Building. The Brown Theater was targeted by the NAACP Youth Council and CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, in 1959 for demonstrations because of its policy to regularly deny admittance to African Americans. The demonstrations continued for over 2 years until the theater opened its doors to African Americans following the passage of the Public Accommodations Ordinance in 1963. The marker is located next to the entrance to the theater. Located next to the W.L. Lyons Brown Theater, the Brown Hotel has anchored the magic corner of 4th and Broadway since its opening. James Graham Brown, the hotel's owner, resisted early efforts to integrate the hotel, even requiring black employees to come in through the back alley entrance. Following the passage of the Public Accommodations Ordinance, the Brown Hotel opened its doors to all, and dozens of dignitaries, including, much later, the African-American President of the United States, Barack Obama. The hotel marker is located at the corner of 4th and Broadway. As you continue your march on 4th, headed north towards the Ohio River, keep in mind that much of the entertainment district has changed since the 60s, with demolition and construction of new high-rise buildings and businesses. Louisville continues to evolve, and it is clear 4th Street is back. The March 16, 1961 edition of the Louisville Defender newspaper reported that, in an unprecedented action by the Louisville Police Department, 170 students and 10 adults, including 3 Negro leaders, spearheading protests against segregated public accommodations, were held following mass arrest on 4th Street during the largest demonstration to date against theaters and restaurants. One of those individuals was Frank Stanley, the editor of the Louisville Defender newspaper. Located just north of Broadway on 4th Street, there's a building which served for 60 years as a movie house to 2 separate theaters. The movie house closed in 1986 and was scheduled for demolition until a local entrepreneur bought it and turned it over to 2 arts advocates who created a nonprofit arts organization called the Kentucky Theater Project Incorporated. All that remains of the original entrance to the theater today is the building facade and sign. The marker is located adjacent to the trolley turnaround. The United Artists Penthouse Theater site is just a few steps away from the Ohio-Kentucky Theater. The United Artists Penthouse Theater building closed in the late 1960s following the demonstrations and later reopened as the Louisville Palace Theater. Due to a massive renovation, the building has retained many of its historic architectural elements. The Louisville Palace often hosts national and local performing groups. The marker is located in front of the entrance to the theater. Let's now venture across the street from the Palace Theater to the Mary Anderson and Rialto Theater. The former theater currently houses Encore on 4th and other businesses. The Rialto Theater opened as Louisville's first grand movie palace in 1921. The Mary Anderson Theater opened in 1933. The theater's grand facade invited moviegoers to enter. The marker, located near the alley adjacent to the restaurant, is a historical reminder that the site was one of 6 theaters that were targeted by protesters due to their segregation policy. As we continue north across Chestnut Street, pause for a moment in front of the old Walgreens drugstore located on the east corner of 4th and Chestnut Street. Currently under construction, the 555 South 4th Street building was once a Walgreens drugstore. The building was where the first act of civil resistance occurred in 1959. According to the Louisville Defender, a delegation that included the mayor of Kingston, Jamaica, and representatives from national, state, and local governments were denied service at the Walgreens. This action led a group of Central High School students and their teacher, Lyman T. Johnson, to protest in front of the store. Continuing north on 4th, the Civil Rights Movement marker describes the sit-in demonstration movement and sites. Located at the west intersection of 4th and Guthrie Street, the sign provides a historical overview of the Civil Rights Movement in Louisville. As you keep walking north on 4th, you will pass the Seelbach Hotel and Starbucks. Make a left onto Muhammad Ali Boulevard and proceed west. On Muhammad Ali Boulevard, again, formerly Walnut Street, just past the alley leading to the Seelbach parking garage, you'll see the Blue Boar cafeteria marker. Blue Boar was where protesters were treated harshly by white customers who would often step on them as they would enter the popular establishments. As the story goes, one fair-complexioned young woman entered the restaurant and was seen having lunch. Protesters laughed and told management that African Americans were already admitted to the restaurant and pointed to their fellow fair-complexioned protester inside. On seeing this, Blue Boar management escorted the young woman out of the restaurant with the protesters laughing. You will now turn around and head east, passing the Seelbach Hotel and across 4th Street to the Embassy Suites Hotel, formerly Stewart's Dry Goods. Stewart's was a battleground site for the demonstrators because of the store's resistance to opening its establishment to blacks. Demonstrators led by CORE, the Youth Council of the NAACP, a coalition of churches and other individuals, began in February 1960 and resulted in Stewart's periodic closing due to the disruption of business by the demonstrations. Stewart's employees assaulted demonstrators by knocking them down to get them to disperse. The demonstrations continued throughout the year, leading up to the Nothing New for Easter boycott. The passage of the Public Accommodations Ordinance formally opened Stewart's doors to blacks in 1963. As you cross Muhammad Ali Boulevard, you will enter 4th Street Live. The location of the Kaufman-Strauss marker is on the right side of the street in front of the building entrance. Kaufman's and Stewart's were the Macy's department stores of today. Student demonstrators described stand-ins as their attempt to be seated at the lunch counter. Each time they were refused, they would step to the back of the line and wait their turn again. This was very frustrating to white customers trying to enter during lunchtime, so the store began closing the restaurant for lunch to avoid the demonstrators. Continue your march crossing the intersection of 4th and Liberty. Proceed across Liberty and continue to the Louisville Visitor Center. Your march has ended at this location. You may pick up additional maps and start your return trip back to Broadway.